Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We hope you are having a great day, and we appreciate you tuning in for today's webinar featuring Julio Castro, Sales Director at Pronk Technologies. As always, this webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI. Pronk Technologies is today's sponsor. Their mission is to manufacture biomedical test equipment that helps to make biomedical engineers' jobs easier and more efficient. They provide products that are innovative, portable, rugged, reliable, easy to use, and are made in the USA. We encourage you to visit pronktech.com to learn more about their products. Pronk Technologies was founded in 2004 and is located in Sun Valley, California. California's state motto is a Greek word that translates to, "I found it." The first attendee to use the webinar question feature on your dashboard to give us the correct Greek word and motto of the state of California will win a Webinar Wednesday t-shirt. A couple of reminders before we get started. The first of our HTM mixers takes place next month, August 19th and 20th, at the Omni Interlaken Hotel in Denver, Colorado. This event is supported by the Colorado Association of Biomedical Equipment Technicians. Over 125 attendees have already registered for this 2-day event filled with networking, continuing education, and vendor engagement. These mixers will provide a slightly modified, less crowded, and safer environment. To learn more about this mixer and the upcoming mixers in Wisconsin and Southern California, please visit htmmixer.com. Remember, the post-webinar survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Before we introduce our presenter, let's see who won this week's Webinar Wednesday t-shirt. The correct answer was Eureka, and the winner is Benny Hopgood. Thank you for your participation. As I mentioned earlier, Julio Castro is our presenter today. He will discuss the technology to control test equipment from your smart device to increase accuracy and efficiency in performing PMs and service on medical devices. Julio, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Jennifer. I want to thank Tech Nation for hosting the Webinar Wednesday. I think it's a great service to the biomed community. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. I'm sure you're very busy, and we want to take note of that, and we value your time and your efforts to attend this webinar. We want to definitely discuss a number of things here that we think will benefit you and present to you some new technologies that can help advance the service of medical devices out in the field. So we're going to discuss a number of things and kind of review a couple of important aspects that we need to manage as biomeds day in and day out. First and foremost, how do we identify what are the testing requirements for performing the service on various medical devices with thousands of medical devices out there? It's important that we have a good, clear understanding of what exactly is required to do the service, and then some various methods that are available to access these procedures readily, so as technicians, when you're out there doing the service, you have the information available so that the service can be done efficiently and accurately. And then we're going to learn how you can capture results automatically on the service reports and try to make that process more precise, more accurate, so that we can complete the service as well as we can. And then we're going to get into some new technologies that kind of help connect these pieces together to overall improve that service process. So the important thing is, of course, to identify what do we need to perform the service. From a fundamental point of view, we need to make sure we have the right documentation. The service manuals, of course, are a must. We must have this information available so that we know exactly what is required of this device from a preventative point of view, or if you need to do service, what do we need to do to accomplish that repair, that service, so that we can feel confident putting this device back into service. And this requires us to really be diligent about trying to obtain this information. And I know it's a real challenge out there in getting this information, and as much as possible, trying to obtain it at the point of sale when the facility is purchasing equipment is ideal and first and foremost very important, including trying to obtain a necessary training for the device, depending on the complexity of it, depending on what level of service you're going to perform. Training can be a really important step to have that confidence level that we're prepared to do the service on that particular device. It's not only important to have these service manuals, but it's also important to kind of really understand them. Above and beyond what the procedure calls for you to test and maybe what test points are required, it's important to understand any setup instructions, any specific types of requirements that are needed to do that service properly. When you review these service manuals, not only do you want to look at the actual procedure, but you want to look at the instructional side of it, the requirements, and see, are there any specific things I need to do in order to feel confident that when I'm making any calibration adjustments, that they're done properly and as precisely as possible. And so you'll see things in manuals like warm-up periods that you have to wait before you start a particular test. Maybe there's some setup special tools you need to use, or specific accessories or test jigs that the manufacturer requires that you use. As an example, if you're testing a particular thing that you need to do a calibration, sometimes it requires specific calibrated sets of tools, or in the case of maybe an IV pump, they're going to require special calibration IV sets, maybe specific setup instructions. And so it's really important to understand these deviations, these requirements, I should say, because any deviations from that, they could cause impact on the accuracy of the measurements we're making. So one thing would be when you're doing preventative maintenance, but if you're doing service and calibrations, these deviations can create a measurable and sometimes very significant deviations in our measurements. So if you're not following the manufacturer's requirements for the setup and the special tooling, you could be making adjustments that don't quite meet the manufacturer's requirements and could create situations where we're not calibrating it as best that we can. So it's important to understand these deviations, and a lot of times these the service manuals will also specify what impact from a quantitative point of view, how much variation are you going to see in the measurements if you deviate from those requirements. So it's important to understand those setup and manual requirements as a whole. Of course, we all struggle to find the documentation to do the service. I'm sure we're all used to using back in the day the Biomed listserv to share information and documentation and best practices. It's been run by ECRI now. There's some online sources that we've used in the past. Frank's Workshop has been kind of a tool that's been out there for a while, trying to provide information available to technicians. There's some newer companies out there like OneSource, iFixit, are trying to provide a service to our market, to our field, in giving access to information that gives us the ability to know exactly what is required for that specific medical device. So these resources are also available to us to try to really understand what those procedures are and have them readily available. Now, aside from that, we have to make sure that we've been communicating to our teams, or as an engineer, you understand what your organization's protocols are for performing the service and what those requirements are. They could be very much in line with what the manufacturer or the OEM requires for you to do as far as the service is required. Or maybe your organization has instituted some AEMs, some alternative equipment maintenance programs. And these things all have to be understood and well documented so that whenever we're doing the service, we know exactly what to do, particularly if you're doing an AEM. If you're doing an AEM, you've created a deviated procedure from what the OEM service manual requires for that particular type of service. And so it's important that we understand what those requirements are. Now, if your organization is considering implementing some type of AEM program, that is something that is allowable, I should say. It's something that's permitted by CMS and auditing agencies, but it's something that has to be understood very clearly, and there's a lot of steps involved with determining, is it appropriate for me to institute an AEM program? And we're not going to get into it too much here, but I wanted to point out a great reference. ECRI.org has some great information about considerations that you need to take into account when you're considering an AEM program. They have some best practices there, some actual case studies that could be a good resource if you're considering maybe putting into place an AEM program in your organization. So utilizing the procedures, once you kind of find them and house them, it's how can I make them available? And there's a lot of cases where if you're utilizing a CMMS, that the CMMS itself has these capabilities for you to kind of house or create and store these procedures in the database. And there's even some CMMS systems out there that go a step beyond that and allow you to create electronic procedures, or what's referred to as checklists, that you can export out of the database and utilize them with test equipment. You can utilize them so that the field technicians or the biomeds have the ability to see these procedures without having to be live on the database. And you can even connect these procedures to test equipment and have them execute the required tests, collect information. So if you have databases like this, and maybe you might not have realized or not utilizing it, they can be really helpful to create procedures based on the medical device type, and you can make them as precise and as detailed or as general as you'd like. But what's helpful to me regarding this is I can make a procedure for a defibrillator, and I can assign this procedure to X number of assets in my inventory that match that defibrillator procedure. And then I have these procedures stored in my database that can be recalled by the technicians and executed exactly according to how you would like. And so it helps to have a standardized way, maybe easier to look at and review than a service manual, which can be sometimes quite complex to kind of really sift through and understand what testing do I actually have to do. This allows you to create a checklist and define what information you want the technicians to enter. Do you want them to enter in just a pass-fail results? Do you want them to enter in specific data points? And it gives you a step-by-step methodology to create a procedure that needs to be followed so that you're sure when the service is performed, all of the vital steps that needed to be performed were actually done. There's even a number of CMSs out there that allow you to even create pass-fail ranges for specific tests. So if you wanted to do that and you wanted to really specify very clearly even the pass-fail tolerances, that could be done within that CMS. And so CMS systems can be a really good tool to help you create these electronic procedures and make it more efficient for your technicians to have access to them and run the testing without having to read maybe a complex service manual from the OEM. And these things are really flexible for you to be able to create these procedures, and they're all stored within your database. So it could be quite helpful to do this. And again, you could transfer these types of procedures to certain companies out there that support these kinds of checklist procedures to run these tests using your test equipment as well. So the next step, really, there's even other CMS companies out there that have trying to really meet the needs of the biomed community in the sense that everyone's more mobile now. We're not just working within a hospital, working within the shop itself doing service. Biomeds are out and about visiting satellite facilities, surgery centers, maybe the hospital's multiple campuses. And so needing to have databases that are more mobile oriented and have more flexibility than having to be in front of your bench writing up a procedure. So there's databases now that even go as far as being able to communicate directly to test equipment. And so you have the ability now to not only look at your procedure that's within your CMS system, but also have control of the test equipment, communicate directly to the test equipment, have it execute a series of tests, and report back in real time what those tests were, what those results were, and they could be housed live back into the database. So it allows you to efficiently work within one system, not only to look at your procedure, but also to collect the information from a variety of different kinds of test products. And so it makes that process much more efficient than trying to do it kind of offline or maybe doing it manually. So there's a lot of great technologies out there from a CMS point of view that are really trying to focus on improving the service side of being able to perform the service, but also document the service, which is, of course, just as critical. So connecting all these pieces is really important from a biomedical engineering point of view. We're out there servicing a lot of medical devices. You're trying to do the very best job that you can, but with so many different types of products out there and so much need to do the service and the volume of service that has to be done, really needing to connect the technician to all of the steps involved can really help give confidence not only in the service that's performed, but allow the technician to be very efficient in the work that they're doing. So it's important that we give the biomedical engineers the procedures that they need. How can we incorporate the test equipment to help aid them in performing that test or those series of tests? How do we document and what needs to be documented when I complete the service? And depending on what kind of systems I'm using, how do I connect it back to my corporate databases, CMS systems? Maybe you're using a different kind of process or a different kind of database to house this information. How do I collect this and have this in a centralized location so that I can retrieve information when I need to? So all of these pieces are very critical, and it's important that we look at how test equipment can help aid in that process, because it helps connect those pieces together and help make our jobs much easier when we have so many responsibilities to take care of. So the tools are important from a variety of different ways. We talked about the CMS a little bit and trying to utilize and harness the power of your CMS system or a database to help you manage all of your inventory and what procedures need to be done. But the test equipment is an important piece that should be considered very closely. It's important to identify solutions that allow you to standardize your testing methods, create a variety of different test protocols depending on the devices you need to test, so that you're sure you're doing the correct test for the device that you have. And then being able to more seamlessly generate records so that you know that they're precise and contain the information that your organization needs. The equipment needs to have the flexibility to do automated testing that match your protocols, that you're able to kind of dictate to the test equipment, I want to do A, B, C series of tests, and that not that they're pre-programmed and fixed and you're having to kind of modify your process to meet what the test equipment does. It should be vice versa. So the equipment needs to be able to be customizable and be able to execute all of the tests you need in a very efficient and an automated way. You want to make sure that the solutions can be integrated with what your organization is utilizing. So if you're utilizing smart devices, tablets, computers, whatever they may be, you want that technology to be able to connect to it. That way you don't have to carry an extra proprietary device possibly to connect all of these pieces together, because that just adds another layer of complexity. And of course, you want to look and see what is the flexibility to control and collect the information of the service that you've performed. What can you do with those results? Well, how can I store them? What kind of transfer capabilities do I have? Can I make electronic records? And can I support various methods of transferring them? Does the technology provide other methods to be able to move the data around? Because maybe I don't have a CMS, or maybe I'm not using a sophisticated CMS system that has these other benefits and I need to manage them in some other way. So having a solution that allows you to have multiple means to collect and house and store the information is very important. So what we've been hearing from the field, from the biomed community for a number of years is trying to find a way to improve this whole process and make it more efficient and give more flexibility in the hands of the biomedical engineers so that they can accomplish these tasks much more seamlessly, much more efficient. So we've introduced something we refer to as Mobilize, and the concept is to be able to introduce a wireless set of equipment that you can connect and operate from your smart device. And so the concept is that we have Bluetooth communications in our products. Our safety analyzer, we call the Safety Sim, has a Bluetooth capability in it that allows it to communicate to your smart device in a sense that you can control the device, you can dictate to the analyzer what testing you want to run, and you can have the analyzer execute these series of tests and report back to your device the tests, the pass-fail limits, and your test results. And we've had an application out prior that allows you to do this sort of automation and testing with our safety analyzer, but now we've taken it a step further. we've taken it a step further because now with a single interface, a single user interface, you can now communicate with the safety analyzer via wireless method, wireless technology, and also our simulator products, the SimCube NIBP simulator that has ECG respiration, invasive blood pressure. You can also communicate to that device and control it and dictate to the devices from your smart device what testing you want it to do, what are the specific settings you want it to run, and it will communicate that wirelessly to the devices, and the devices report back the respective information on whatever those test results happen to be. Same is true for our SpO2 simulator, the Oxen Flex, has that same Bluetooth capability that allows us to communicate to it and control it and dictate to the simulator what tests need to be done based on the application and how I've defined it to run the test. So the control is in the palm of your hands through the application to control all of these devices, and also including our infusion pump analyzer. The FlowTrax infusion pump analyzer also has a Mobilize wireless communication feature that allows me to execute all of the required infusion pump testing via that same exact application. I could simultaneously communicate to all of these devices with my smart device and control them and dictate what testing needs to be done. So this gives us a much more efficient way to be able to do all of our testing and to know on our device exactly what testing is required for that specific medical device that I'm testing. So the Mobilize solution allows it to be utilized from a CMMS-driven type electronic procedure. So if your organization has electronic procedures already and you want to be able to kind of execute those procedures, you can export them from systems that have those capabilities, and we could run them on the application. You could see your own procedure right on the application, and you could run your own tests and tell the equipment what tests you want it to run, and it will collect the information back within your procedures, create a complete record that you can then push back to your CMMS system to have that information reside right back there. So it allows a good, efficient way to run the testing. Or if you are an organization that maybe you have a CMMS system, but it doesn't have those capabilities to write procedures or export procedures, or maybe you prefer to kind of do that on a outside of a CMMS application, you want to kind of do it on your own devices, then you also have flexibility to create a library of test protocols. You could create them and categorize them by medical device type. And so you could create a library of procedures right on the application and house them there. And it really is helpful for organizations that maybe don't have a CMMS system but want a way to know what test do I need to perform for these various medical devices. This is really a benefit in a number of ways, we believe, because it allows you to have a standardized method that your technicians are going to be working. You know they're going to be doing the same exact test on medical device A, B, C, D, and you don't have any concern that any deviation, any important tests that needed to be performed were missed or maybe were not performed. By having this procedure right there with the technician as they're working, it really helps standardize this across the board. And we can execute all of the tests that are required. We can control the test equipment. Even if I have a predefined procedure, if I want to change a setting, I can do that live in the application. So if I have a particular heart rate, maybe I pre-programmed, but I want to change it, you could do that. And you could do you could change any of the parameters that are listed within the Mobilize solution so that you can make any deviations you need to based on the equipment you're testing at the moment. So it's not a kind of a hardwired fixed solution. You have the flexibility to make the changes you need to. So we want to be able to give you an easier interface to be able to do all of the testing that you need to. So a single point control of all the devices is really beneficial. A bi-directional communication allows you to do that. And we have the ability for you to pre-program whatever test sequences you want. So if you have a specific quantity of electrical safety sequences that you know you need to do, maybe you have a sequence one that you need to do on a patient monitor, maybe you have a different one for beds, defibrillators, whatever the devices are, you can create a library also of pre-programmed sequences for electrical safety and have the application utilize those sequences by device type. So I can connect, I want to run my safety test A on device A, I want to run safety test B on device B, and so you have complete flexibility and control to customize whatever testing you need to do by that device that you're servicing. So it allows you to really define it, not only the tests, but your test limits and your protocols as well. So we have that for the safety analyzer, and within the same application, I could be running an automated safety test while simultaneously communicating to our simulators as an example here. And we could be setting the simulators to run the test protocols I need to for that particular device. I can control all of the parameters that I need to right from my smart device, create whatever test protocols I need to. If I want to have high settings, maybe to check all of the performance on a device, I can create a multitude of different sequences that I need to. So I can create high settings, maybe standard adult settings, maybe if it's a neonatal monitor, you create neonatal settings. So you can customize each and every setting that you see to fit whatever the tests are that are required. Even if you have additional tests, like maybe you need to run an end-tidal CO2, maybe you're doing a ventilator test, you need to have some flow volume test, you can add those functions and add those tests by pressing the more key here and add additional things beyond the standard features that are available on our devices. So if you have other things you need to test beyond that, you can add those parameters in there and actually add the results as well. So the concept is to be able to set all the parameters we need to, depending on my organization, depending on what my documentation needs are. I have the option to just pass-fail the test. As we know, some organizations are strictly kind of a pass-fail organization. They don't necessarily capture all of the individual results. It's not required within their quality system. That's kind of an organizational decision. So you have the option just to be a pass-fail and enter in. You could tap on the pass-fail key here and it would pass, or you tap it again, it would put a fail. If the parameter is not on that device, you would just leave it blank and that would be excluded from the actual report. So whatever field you enter in a value, those fields get reported on the service report. Anything that's blank, it doesn't get reported because maybe we didn't have that feature on that particular device. And then the technician would be able to enter in the results. If they need to enter in the results, they could tap on the result field and enter in the individual results that they saw for that device. If it's a measured value that the product has, then we would capture that result automatically, which I'll show you here in just a moment. And you have the ability within the application to add notes. At the bottom here, you can see there's a notes field. So if I did something on that medical device, I want to make sure I capture something maybe I observed during the testing or maybe something I had to do. I could do that as well. And there's also a camera function. So I am able to take a snapshot of the product that's under test. Maybe I want to just capture all the results I'm seeing on that device. You could turn on the camera function on your smart device and take a snapshot of the device. Or maybe there's a broken item and you want to capture that, hey, look, this item was broken and needed to be addressed. You could take a snapshot of that and that information gets automatically added to the report as well. So trying to give you easy ways to capture the important information when we're out there doing the service. In a little bit more detail, we have detailed steps and data collection capabilities depending on the parameter you need to test. Of course, for a vital signs monitor, not only do we need to do some functional tests, but there's some specific calibration testing that we have to do. For NIBP, as an example, one important test is to do a leak test. Important to make sure that the patient monitor doesn't have any kind of leak between the hose, the cuff, maybe the hardware within the monitor, and this is an important test to make sure it passes. So there's a leak mode within the product, and within the application, we're able to put the product into that leak mode and run the leak test that's required. So you can kind of see here it tells you that we're performing a leak rate test, and in the left gray box you have the pressure that the simulator is actually measuring. The SimCube comes with a digital manometer, a very precise digital manometer, so I can capture what that static pressure is from the simulator that it's measuring when I inflate it onto the medical device I'm testing. And then the SimCube will automatically start to calculate a leak rate and display what that leak rate value is. So I, as a technician, would do the test for whatever that time period is. It could be a minute, here's the elapsed time, it could be 2 minutes, and I could capture that result and pass it would either pass my criteria or it would not, and I could capture that result here. And in every one of these screens that you see, you're able to add notes, capture images, because we know depending on the stage of the service, you may have to capture additional information. The NIVP also has the need to check the static calibration of the transducer. Very common test that has to be done on all patient monitors is what is the static accuracy of the transducer. So you can actually, from the application, tell the SimCube to go into a pressure accuracy test. It gives you the measurement that it's seeing based on that inflation value that we've inflated it to, and you're able to capture the value displayed on the monitor, patient monitor, be able to calculate what the difference is to determine if that device passes calibration test or not. And all along, if I need to do multiple tests of a pressure accuracy or leak test, I could simply press the more key and do subsequent tests. Maybe my calibration requires me to do more than one test point. Maybe I need to do 100, maybe I need to do 2 or 3 250 millimeters of mercury. You can do as many test points as you need to. So you can repeat it as many times as required by your procedures. Same thing is true for another common test, an important safety test that should be done during service and preventative maintenance, which is referred to as the overpressure test, or some people call it a pop-off test. And it's basically needing to verify that when the monitor inflates the cuff beyond a certain pressure point, that it automatically releases that pressure, and it's designed to protect the patient from injury. So if you have cases where maybe there's a failure in the monitor and the pressure's not being released, you want to protect the patient from that. And so you want to know what is that trip point where the monitor releases that pressure immediately from the cuff. And they refer to that as overpressure. So the SimCube would go into the manometer mode here, and it would capture what that peak pressure was at the moment that the monitor released it, acknowledging that the pressure exceeded the maximum limit, and I'm able to capture that result here as well. So we're trying to give you very intuitive, easy to use menus to be able to get through these calibration steps efficiently and quickly. Same is true for Infusion Pump Analyzer. The Infusion Pump Analyzer, we have Infusion Pump Analyzer screens within the Mobilize solution that allows me to do visual inspections, pass those, and more importantly, to do a volume test. And I can define within my procedures what are those targets. So I can define what is the target volume I need to infuse, so the technicians know exactly how much they're supposed to test. And I can also put the target rate so they know what it needs to be, the pump needs to be programmed to. And so you have your target values here. In gray, you have your measured values from the analyzer. So the analyzer would display what the measured volume result was at the end of the test, or actually throughout the test it does calculate that. And the same for rate. It calculates what was the average flow rate for the test since I started doing it. At the bottom here is kind of the elapsed time, so you can see how much time was involved. There are some infusion devices that want you to do the volume test based on a time test. So we do have features that support that as well. And then you would capture the result, and you'll be able to see everything that you need to determine, does this result within my specified tolerances that I have in my protocols. So here you'll be able to see a result capture screen that allows me to look at what was the volume that was delivered. It has the measurement there against the target, which in this case was 20 milliliters, and you have a calculated deviation. So what was the deviation from the target? You have it here in percentage and also in volume in milliliters. Same is for rate. Again, going back to some devices that are doing a rate test, some infusion devices require a rate test, and so you're able to kind of see what the variance was between the target rate to the measured rate, and we'll give you that tolerance there. So it allows me in a very efficient way to have on hand what my tolerances are and to know easily whether it was a pass or fail. Same is true for occlusion. The infusion pump analyzer built-in pressure meter that allows us to do the occlusion test on any kind of infusion device, and so I can program the same sort of thing here. I can program what is the target occlusion at which I need to make sure this unit triggers the occlusion alarm at. And I can also include a feature that allows us to automatically start the occlusion test after a certain amount of volume has been infused. There are certain infusion devices that require X number of fluid to be infused before you start the occlusion test, so you can program that here. And then the app and the analyzer captures the peak pressure here, at which moment the pressure, the infusion pump triggered the alarm, and you're able to capture what that peak pressure was. And you could repeat this again as many times as you want for volume or for occlusion, depending on what your protocols are. So we're trying to provide you a real intuitive user interface. You're able to capture information in a detailed way without having to figure out what you need to do. So the Mobilize solution is very adaptable. It's adaptable depending on what your organizational needs are, how much information do you need, do you have a CMS system, do you not, do you want to run it and utilize it directly from the application and house your library of testing protocols there. And allows you to also have a complete report with all the information that you need to keep track of within your organization. So of course you have a customizable header that allows us to have information about what facility it was at, maybe what technician did the testing, what is the asset ID, other information about that asset that I may need to track. You can have that there, like model, manufacturer, maybe the location of the device. So you can customize this header to have the appropriate information that you need for your organization. Then you have the actual procedure or the test protocol items or the testing that was required to be done by the technician. So here's an example of one where it has the steps that are involved that we want the technician to follow and to verify that these all passed. And these all have to be completed by the technician in a step-by-step way to make sure that indeed the device passed all of the criteria we require. And then we also support automated sequences, possibly from a CMS or possibly some that you've created from the app directly. So you have the ability to create automated sequences for electrical safety, for any of the simulation parameters, and also for infusion devices. If you're testing a defibrillator, you can add all of that automation as well as any defib tests that you need to run. You could add those and have that information added to the report as well. So even if you're using maybe a third-party defibrillator analyzer or an ESU analyzer, you could still add those items into the checklist, and the technician can still enter in those results into the app and capture it on this report here as well. The Mobilize application can store up to 1,000 records, and you can house them there, but you can transfer them, move them at any moment that you want. But the app is capable of storing 1,000 test records. So we want to be able to give you a solution that allows you to customize it to your best practices. We don't want to give you a fixed type of interface that is rigid and doesn't give you the flexibility you need. And so you can see here from the home screen for applications where we are wanting to create our own library of testing protocols, you could see them here in this window. You could select whichever device protocol I want to run, and then we'll execute that test. And you can make them as specific or as generic as you want. I've had customers who make generic tests because maybe they test a wide range of products and their procedures are set up to be able to support that. Or if you want manufacturer specific procedures, you can create those and save those as well. So the flexibility is in your hands to be able to do that testing and create the protocols that you need. The smart device has a built-in scanner function in it. So if your facility is using barcodes, you can scan that device ID and enter in that asset ID right into the report. If you're using a CMS-driven solution, you can even have the scanner function, once it scans the asset ID, open up the appropriate checklist for that device that came from your CMS so that the technician knows, I know that for this particular device, I need to run this particular procedure, and the application finds that for you automatically. So wanting to give you those tools to make it more efficient, more precise, and being able to be sure that you're testing and performing the correct tests for that medical device that you have. You can save hundreds of these testing protocols by medical device type on the application. For a CMS-driven solution, you can have thousands of procedures, thousands of assets loaded onto the application, so there's no real limitation there as to how many you can load. So you decide how best you want to use the application and utilize it to meet your needs. Another nice feature we've added was sometimes you're going to be doing a test on a particular device and maybe it has a different configuration, maybe it's got different options and you need to add or remove a test. Well, you have the ability to modify the pre-programmed test sequences as you're testing if you need to, and then you can save them as a new device type. So if I selected maybe a generic oximeter test, but I need to do some very specific testing on a Masimo rainbow oximeter I could select the generic oximeter testing, modify the test as I'm testing to do it per the Masimo Rainbow Technologies requirements, and then I could just save those as a Masimo Rainbow medical device type protocol. So meaning that you don't have to have your protocols created beforehand. You could start with a generic one, and as you're testing, you could be modifying them, saving them as a new one, and you're building your library of medical device type protocols as you're testing. So you don't need to kind of program it ahead of time if you don't want to. You can just start with some basic checklists and just build from there. So it gives you the flexibility to kind of work and build your library as you're working. You don't need to do it all, invest all that time ahead of time if you don't have that luxury of time to do that. And you could run it independently as a standalone application, or we can connect it to your CMS if you want that information to be flowing directly back to your CMS, or if your CMS needs to kind of dictate to the technicians what needs to be done, it can be supported in either way. We included a Bluetooth option as well that allows us to kind of communicate to a Bluetooth label maker, and we're utilizing that to be able to print PM stickers. And so you have the ability to print a laminated PM sticker right from the application. You could control what information you want to print on the PM sticker, what order you want to print it on, what order you want it printed on. You could customize fields here to have your title, your facility, the technician. You could create the inspection interval that you need to. So if you're in a 3-month, a 6-month, or a 12-month interval, or even up to 24, you could select the interval and it will automatically post the next inspection date that is required. And you have all these fields available to you to decide what information you want printed on the label. You can even change the format of the date. You can manually print PM stickers if you need to. A variety of different flexibility there, so you can communicate to a Bluetooth printer. And it's available in multiple colors. I've talked to a number of biomedical departments, and they like to color code their PM stickers to try to make it a little easier for the clinical staff and the biomedical engineering team to easily identify what PMs are due or need service this particular year, and just a nice simple way to be able to do that and identify them. So the labels are available in multiple colors. And what's nice is the printer, it's got a really good battery in it, and it'll run for a minimum 10 hours before you need to recharge it. So it's a nice additional option to have if you're needing to print PM stickers, which we all do, and this gives you a nice easy way to do that. Integration into CMS, we have a variety of different methodologies to be able to do that. We do support the electronic checklist methods that some systems have out there to export electronic procedures out of your database, and we can import it into our Mobilize solution and run them so that you can see your own procedures, run the tests, and collect the data back to your CMS system. We have capabilities to directly interface to the CMS system where you don't need to necessarily export any of your work orders or checklist. You could just have the CMS talk directly to the analyzers and communicate to them what needs to be tested and report back the information live right then and there. So it kind of eliminates that middleware that you may have to have if you like to export your work orders and such, where you prefer your technicians to work live from the database. Well, we'll interface to it directly. Also give you some other options to sync data via cloud drives. If you're using maybe different methods to store information, it does support the ability to export information, PDF files of the individual tests, groups of test reports into a PDF so that you can store them, you can print them, and you can do a variety of things with them. We also included a unique flash drive that it's a single flash drive that has a lightning port on one side and a USB port on the other. And it allows me in a little bit more manual way to transfer information from my smart device, maybe to another location. If I'm using maybe some legacy systems where I don't have the ability to use cloud services or export information, I could plug in this cloud drive and push information between my smart device back to my computer in an easy way. So we do support some unique flash drives out there that allow you to do that kind of transfer using a memory stick. Even if you're not currently using a CMS, as we mentioned, you could utilize the application as well. If you used to have maybe electronic checklist from a different database, a different CMS system that you're not using anymore, but you still have those checklists with you, we can load those onto the application and you can still use them. So all those legacy checklists that maybe you spent countless hours creating, that's kind of a shame to have them, to let them go, you could utilize them with our application. Because of course you invest a lot of time in those procedures, and we all can appreciate the labor that it takes to create these procedures. So why have to repeat them? We could use them and use them on our application. You could create generic checklists, as I mentioned, not associated with specific assets. You could have things very specific to a medical device type, or even a unique identifier of that medical device, so that you're even extra sure that the right procedure was performed on that medical device. You decide how much of a direct connection you want to have to what's being done, what's being tested on the medical device, or how much freedom your technicians can have to do that testing. Electronic reports are available, can be saved to your computers, PC folders. You could batch send reports up to 1,000 at a time. So if you're working at a particular site and you want to batch, the 50 devices you tested, you could do that, put it in a PDF and send it on over as well. We have fundamental ways you could move information as well. You have the copy paste function. So if I don't have maybe a database that has many capabilities, you could still use the copy paste function to move data from one point to another. You could print. We have the ability to email information as you want as well in the reports. And it also utilizes all the share functions within the smart device to be able to share information using whatever applications you have on your devices already. So the overall benefits, to the challenge that we have is having so much service work to do. How can we really improve that process? And so we really believe that having a consistent test process throughout the department will dramatically reduce the service time that you have and be more efficient to be able to get your work done. And it allows us as technicians to be able to focus on servicing the medical devices and not spending time trying to find that procedure. Where is it? What am I supposed to do to service this medical device? Maybe I'm a new technician and I've been trained on so many devices that I don't have it quite locked in yet. This really helps and aid in having a good reference so you know exactly what needs to be done. And you can avoid having to manually write down your results. A lot of shops are still writing down results manually, maybe transcribing them to another system. And so why even do that? Even if you are going to be transcribing information, why not at least eliminate the need to manually write down the results? And then you have the records there. Detailed records also provide great confidence not only to the organization that's doing the service, but also to the end user to know that the work was done effectively, thoroughly, and precisely. So these records do have a psychological benefit that give confidence that the work was done to the best of our ability. And of course, it gives us improved accreditation compliance. We have confidence that we have clean, accurate records that allows us to be able to be confident when an audit comes along that we have everything we need to be compliant to our standards that we claim in our quality systems. And of course, if you ever need to be involved in patient investigations, one of the first things that we need to do is go pull the service history on a device. So having these complete electronic records can really help make sure, number one, that we're able to investigate the situation as thoroughly as possible, try to find the root cause as effectively as we can. Maybe historical data will tell us something could have changed with that medical device that could have impacted its performance. And from a regulatory point of view, you have the evidence you need to be able to complete the investigation as well as possible. So we really believe the Mobilize solution can help tie all these things together for you to help make your jobs more effective and give you the freedom to do what you do best, which is be out there servicing the medical device and doing our very best to ensure these devices are safe and effective to be used on patients. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, here are some of our questions that have come through. Thank you, Julio. Not sure what the long-term plan is for Mobilize, but if you were to add features from what you have shown today, would existing customers need to purchase them or pay a license fee to get the new features?
Yes, Mobilize is a growing live kind of solution that we've introduced, and we in a lot of cases get the best ideas from the field, from you folks out in the trenches working day in and day out. And so our plan is to always introduce more and more features that make this solution as effective as we can for you. So as we roll out more features, they will become part of the standard app, and you'll be entitled to these features if you have the application. We'll continue to push upgrades out. You'll be entitled to all those upgrades. There's not a fee for the additional features that we will introduce. You'll be entitled to all of those features with no annual cost, no license fees, anything like that. So once you purchase the product, it's not a fixed product that doesn't grow with you. It continues to grow with you for the long term. Good question.
All right, our next question is, I already have some Pronk products. Can I add Mobilize to them, or do I have to buy new products?
Yes. Our philosophy, our president's philosophy has always been from day one is that we want you to have test equipment that is able to grow with you over the long term. And so we never really want to try to obsolete any products. So all of our products we have out there have the ability to be upgraded, or will provide an upgrade path for you to be able to add Mobilize to any existing products that you have. So you don't necessarily need to go out and buy something new. We could look at all of your inventory, and we can add Mobilize to all the existing inventory that's in the field.
Great. Our next question is, you mentioned it currently is compatible with Apple products. Do you have plans to introduce it for other platforms like Android?
Yeah, that's definitely in the plans. We're definitely going to be doing that. We started with iOS. That seems to be the operating system that is most commonly used in the field at the moment. But we are going to be introducing a Android version and a Windows PC version as well. Seems to be a lot of number of biomed shops switching over to maybe some mobile PCs. So we'll be adding the PC version early next year for Android and for Windows.
Great. Okay, our next question is, I have the safety sim, flow tracks, etc. I'm assuming I cannot do any of these Mobilize features if my device doesn't say Mobilize on the front of it.
Yeah, correct. We could verify that. We've done some small quantity of upgrades before we introduce the Mobilize front overlay that you see here. So it's possible maybe some have it before we did the new overlay, but I'd say 99% of the time, if the front of the unit does not say the word Mobilize on it, then it needs to be upgraded.
Okay, thank you. Can you repost the ECRI website about alternative equipment maintenance?
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe Jennifer, we could work together on how best to put that information out there for everyone to be able to use it as a resource. So we could coordinate that to make sure that all of the attendees can get access to that link.
That sounds great, thank you. Next question is, are there any plans to integrate the Bluetooth into the Slim Sim in the future?
The SimSlim, good question. The SimSlim, of course, is our small multi-parameter simulator. It runs on an internal battery that will run for 7 to 10 years without having to charge it, which is great. It's really a useful tool. But the challenge we're facing is that the Bluetooth module, of course, is drawing power on it and will greatly affect the battery life. So we're trying to figure out how to best address that. But what we did do is with the SimCube, with the Mobilize solution, because you can customize all of the parameters, you can run most of the simulations that the SimSlim can with the Mobilize SimCube version. And then if you need to add maybe cardiac output or temp results, you could add those to the Mobilize app and then enter in those results from the SimSlim onto the app. But we're looking into it. It's going to be a little tricky, honestly, just because we don't want to diminish the battery life on the SimSlim.
Thank you, Julio, for your time today and for a great presentation. Thank you also to our listeners for your wonderful questions. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor and to learn more about the products they provide to our industry. Visit prompttech.com. A quick reminder to obtain your certificate for 1 CE credit from the ACI. Please remember to click the link located below this webinar title to complete today's survey. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinars@mdpublishing.com. We will be back next week with another webinar. Visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you and have a great day.